There are some U's indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to get into it. For some reason, I seem to not have my... Oh. Oh, that was weird. I couldn't hear any audio for the first 2 clicks, and then it worked. I mean, I could hear the music, but I don't even know what that was. But anyway, we're about to get into Ascension. We are going to be starting our series, our second semi-final series, here at Ascension number 1, between the Shambler and the Neblime on Crossguard. An exciting day, for sure. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope everybody is having a lovely morning. Roller Skates is awake, so that's a good start. And, yeah. Pretty good stuff. There is no Mesk today, so it'll just be myself. I'm going to get set up here. Well, Alexander is finding a way to watch, to tune in, despite other circumstances. All right, guys. This is the second semifinal of Ascension number 1, our very first Cosmonarchy Brood War tournament. We've got some very exciting changes already planned for Cosmonarchy Brood War. Many of those were inspired by the tournament matches themselves, or just things that should have been done to begin with, or whatever. So stay tuned for those. A lot of those changes are to the maps. Some of them are to the balance. Of course, there's lots of bug fixes and stuff, as usual. But enough about that, because we got to focus on the here and now. Shambler, also known as the Shambler, he is definitely the favorite in this series. If I had to describe Neblime's playstyle so far, it's fairly stable with Terran. He's still learning the project. He, again, only really played for a couple of hours prior to competing in the very first tournament and managed to defeat Benno thanks to his, I would say, his just core macro skills and Benno's own lack of familiarity with the project as well, since Benno is also a new player. He qualifies to the semifinals here, but the Shambler, I mean, he's playing Zerg, so Neblime has only fought against Terran in a competitive setting so far, and otherwise doesn't really necessarily know what Shambler has to offer as far as that is concerned. So that is the way that I would set this match up. Is Neblime is an underdog, a capable one, could certainly take some games off of the Shambler, but I would expect the Shambler to meet Mystery Meat in the Grand Finals, which we will, of course, schedule following the conclusion of this series. So now that we've sort of established what's going on, the Shambler, a very aggressive player, somebody who is not shy about doing one-base all-ins. We saw that in his group. Somebody who has played himself into form, so started off a little bit shakier than Mystery Meat did in Group A, but the Shambler has been playing a lot more, and even more so than Mystery Meat, I think. So kind of interesting is that he's had some pretty good general situations as far as the practice is concerned, whereas Neblime, I haven't seen, high nor tail of him, right? And as a result, I'm not 100% sure what his practice is like or how he's feeling. So we'll initiate a ready check. I've set up the storylines, set up the situation, give you some idea of what's going on. And, of course, I should talk about the pick ban as well, which we will get into in a moment, because we are starting the semifinals number 2 for Ascension number 1. It's Mouth of Shambhala, a.k.a. the Shambler, versus Neblime. Go ahead and fix the network. And now, let's talk about the Shambler. Let's talk about Neblime. Of course, neblime, the Arrow Terran. One of my favorite colors, actually, on Terran. And the Saffron Zerg. We don't get to see Saffron too often because it's a rare color, but you check it out, man. Technically, all of the colors are individually rare. It's just Saffron is such a unique tone. A single gas harvester here for the Shambler. Looks like he'll be going for a Hydrock opener. That's my speculation based on that. And on the side of neblime, he's not interested in going for Quarry. So you can see he's not on the gas. And as a result, he will be going for, presumably, a Stockade opener. In fact, looks like he's just about to drop that one now. There he is. This is Crossguard, a map that has received changes in the meantime, which are not reflected in this particular area, but the build space of the mains have been opened up and stuff, as well as some decoration changes and a couple other things, like the high ground natural is reshaped to be a little bit higher value, but also easier to attack into. So there's something like that you can watch out for the next Ascension, which is already planned this weekend, Saturday, the 8th of July. Workers are going to go ahead and meet each other, a little bit more so on neblime's side of the map, but nothing doing just yet. Hydrock then indeed going down for the Shambler. And while we're here, I should talk about the map pool and the pick ban. So the Shambler came very close to losing a map in his group to the Beaver. And that was on Infinite Velocity, a map that is, you could say it's a bit of a gimmick map, right? You can certainly say that, and I think that's certainly fair. That being said, we do not have that map in the series. So that, alongside Terminus, has been banned by the Shambler. Meanwhile, the way that the format works is that the lower seed can ban one map and pick the starter map. So this is where neblime wants to start on. He wants to start on Crossguard. And judging by this worker pathing, I'm not sure if it was intended that, this worker is going to head out and over there, or maybe he's scouting for proxies. Maybe he's just taking a roundabout way. Neblime making sure to check this area. What's going on here? And the first combat unit for the Shambler will be the Skithra Corps. Now again, neblime has not played against Zerg before, so I'm not sure if he's prepared for that in particular. As far as the fact that Zerg have air units fairly early on, air combat units, right? One per structure that exists in the early game. Obviously, the Zerg falling behind a little bit in workers, as is customary, considering the larva limitation. But the Larvos colony, soon to be called the Larvos Caesient, once this next update hits on the 8th, is going to pad that out a little bit. However, he doesn't necessarily have the economy to do too much other than pump the Skithra Corps. There is no Watchdog yet, but you can tell that maybe it's being planned. There it is, already in the list. And with a very fast Vestry, I think the Clerics are going to help sustain versus the Skithra Corps. It looks like with all the Mavericks, neblime wants to play this out a little bit like in standard Brood War TVZ, which is kind of interesting. Skithra Corps do have, less range than Mutalisks do in Brood War. This Watchdog is also not able to be surrounded by workers very well, so you might see that sort of crop up as a potential problem. Watchdog will zone out the enemy, and of course the Mavericks are sort of split here and on the way. They will be recalled now. Some stims have been made, and the first Skithra Corps is already split as the Watchdog relocates to a little bit more of a defensible position. And now that it's been very clear that it's not just one Skithra Corps, it's many, there is indeed going to be a second Watchdog put up. And maybe the Skithra Corps will spot the army. It looks like they will. Ooh, one of them narrowly escaping death there. Just 2 more shots would have done it in. Well, actually, technically not because of the 2 armor, but, whatever. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if this was an accident or not by the Shambler, but he does end up sowing a little bit of chaos and just picking off 1 extra Maverick and then falling back. There is already a Circuit, and the SimCity is looking pretty okay here. The Zoriustaleth and the Lekizalisk on the way, with the Zork's Shroud already up for the Shambler, means that this infantry attack is very unlikely to do too much. There's not much mobility with this particular army. Now, the Mavericks are obviously more mobile thanks to stims, but they still want to wait for the Clerics. And meanwhile, we do have the Cyprians out, so defense should not be an issue for the Terran. And still everybody on just 1 base each. So we're not seeing too many crazy things happen. Catching up in workers is the Shambler's next move, it looks like. And there are going to be some Mavericks and some Clerics. Down here, the Starpad does have its worker picked off for construction. And it doesn't look like... Oh, there was actually a fallen Skittercore, so it wasn't a free move here. And this makes sense from the Shambler positioning-wise. It looks like the Clerics are going to scout out ahead and reveal the Lekizalisk. That is probably going to, you know, give him some pause. And the Skittercores are even going to maybe try and sandwich it out. I'm not sure if he's seen the Zoriustaleth. You know, it's difficult to know exactly what is being thought of here. But yeah, as the Zerg continues to catch up in workers, we should actually see, you know, even Steven economy. Infantry second wave is going to take a look at the high ground base. And meanwhile, there's going to be a treasury and a watchdog put down almost certainly here. That's exactly what we see. Yeah, so infantry are going to continue going across the map. They're going to confirm, you know, like obviously this base isn't being taken. Maybe this base is. We see the corpse of a Skittercore over there. So, you know, Shambler kind of knowing what's going on here. And at least keeping tabs on his opponent's army movements. But feeling a little boxed in, I think. And he might not be expecting this amount of infantry. He only has one Lekizalisk, you know, the fairly expensive units. So I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, his army positioning ends up getting caught off guard, and this attack from the bottom ends up, you know, hitting him pretty hard there. At this point, he hasn't been able to find the infantry. Yeah, they're syncing up now, and there's a lot of clerics with this first batch of army. It would have been really good if he could have divided and conquer in that way, but, you know, his Skittercores aren't here. There is an Anseal for detection even for that. So this is a pretty big move. Now, he can surround and force this commitment, but at this point, the Zoriustaleths are already being focused down, not really being allowed to spawn too many Rillarocores. The Lekizalisk is going to burrow, so I think that should be enough, but the first attack is actually not going to be too significant. And I think maybe the focus fire wasn't there for Neblime, but at this point, the Clerics are going to be ripped apart, and that was a really, really impactful flank. Ends up losing a Zoriustaleth, almost a second one, maybe a Hydra or two, certainly not even the Circuith itself. That is going to make it seem a little bit hard to hold there. And even the Anseal not actually being recalled, it's not even going to escape at the last second. That was an expensive loss of, you know, 75 minerals, 75 gas. Another Anseal is already out. It's going to go ahead and travel to the top right to confirm no satellite bases are being taken, which certainly could be done based on the mineral count of the Shambler, as he's going to go ahead and push his units down to the bottom middle. Meanwhile, a quarry being constructed at this secondary base. We've got 2 anchors, one of which already staffed with Mavericks. Not really super defensible on this side from ground units, and the Anseal is all the way to the top right. So if a Lekizalisk was sent with this army, which it's, you know, there's 2 of them on the way, it feels like this could actually work out in the favor of the Shambler quite nicely here. There's not really any anti-armor. There's not really that many units in general. So this is hitting at a time that is not necessarily too, you know, too significant here. The Cleric is going to try to keep the Masons alive. Only one of them going down so far. Some of the pathing getting a little bit awkward there. Could have lifted off the Watchdog a little bit earlier. And yes, the Anchor will go ahead and deploy. The Anseal has already been recalled, so it's in a pretty good timing here. Trying to go ahead and protect the Anchor. And, of course, the Lekizalisk is going to be pretty good for it as far as killing off the Masons that are trying to repair this Anchor desperately. Some more Mavericks coming in from the side. Anseal trying to regenerate its energy so it can continue to provide a shield over that. But the Lekizalisks will both fall. There was a lot of Mason kills. There's now a 4-worker disadvantage for Neblime. But he holds relatively well, and he has 3 worker production queues at this point, so he can catch back up very quickly. You can already see him closing the gap there. Meanwhile, this second base is up, but not being mined from. There's a worker transfer and 3 idle workers here. So technically, as you know, as far as we're concerned, there is a little bit of an improved economy, like economic advantage for Neblime, despite losing all those workers. He hasn't transferred too many, but at this stage, you know, we are thinking, okay, maybe you're not harvesting as much gas as the Shambler is, but you are already at that stage where you can tech up to tier 2. You just need to wait for the minerals now. And of course, there's the open question of, will the Shambler allow him to wait for the minerals? Will there be, you know, more attacks, more aggression? Well, I think we know the answer to that, as Shambler is already massing up yet another attack force and starting to set up some defenses at his natural on the high ground. So both of our players taking those high ground bases, not interested in taking the low ground ones or the micro satellite bases over here. Instead going to go for that territory. And this is the right choice for an attack target. There's only 1 anchor. It has 2 Cyprians. The Zoriustaleth, despite being wounded, can certainly absorb that level of damage. And the Anseal is going to be over here, but it's not actually holding It's a little bit useful actually because it's being absorbed. It's absorbing all of the Hydras. However, I think the Mason Pole was a little bit too late, and the Anseal could have been on top of that anchor to prevent all of that damage from going down. So now there needs to be a mad dash, slapdash move. I think all of these Hydras are going to be very, very lethal. This coming at a time where that anchor was not on the high ground, which obviously it can't be in this particular case. It wasn't in a more defensible position that sort of begged the army to come in a little bit closer. The Mason Pole to try to see if he can maybe drill versus them, but he's losing quite a few. Some Cyprians out, but they get sniped very quickly. The Cleric's trying to run around, desperately healing units, but it's not going to be enough, I don't think. And that's just going to be such a massive amount of economic damage. Neblime will GG out, and the Shambler takes a 10-minute victory. All right, the Shambler has indeed gone up 1-0 in the series. Equilibrium is selected by Neblime. The way that this works, as a reminder, the loser of the previous match picks the next map. So that is what has happened thus far. Honestly, I think Neblime was caught off guard by how durable Hydras were compared to standard bio, and also how mobile the Zerg army can be in the mid-game. So, you know, getting into that situation where he's a little bit, again, unfamiliar with the capabilities of Zerg in that situation. Certainly not a bad move, you know, but he was floating a lot of gas without the minerals to turn into an Atlas, and so his purchase of that structure came a little bit late. Neblime, in the bottom left, familiar spawn, actually. The Palatinate Purple, the Shambler, will be his opponent as the Cyan Terrans deploy to the field. And this time, we are going to be getting a Zork's opener, it looks like, from the Shambler. He's got two guys on the Geyser. Geyser? Geyserg. That's basically the Shambler's alternate ID is Geyserg. Zork's openers, in my opinion, my estimation, my analysis, should be relatively volatile, especially versus somebody who hasn't necessarily played as them very much. I don't know if, you know, Neblime going for this double gas harvesting as he started now. He's already got this many minerals. I think maybe this is a Fulcrum opener. This is what it looks like to me. This looks like a Fulcrum opener to me that's going to be a little bit slower than it could be. Now, the good news about a Fulcrum opener versus Zork's is you're going to have access to Goliaths, which are very adept at dealing with some of the early level of, you know, Gorger cores, if that's going to be the opener. They're pretty good at everything. Obviously, they do cost gas. The Zork's opener means you should probably flex into a star pad simply for passive detection. And the Droleth Scout for the Shambler will confirm the Fulcrum opener. No tricky behavior, like Beaver, where he was building his structure up there. That's actually something that Mesk likes to do as well. Worker tickling. Big fan of that. Take a big sip of water. Take a big sip of coffee. And if you guys like this tournament and you want to see more like it, well, we're already planning another one. But also, bottom right corner of your screen. Some coffee. The Gorgrikor is a powerful Zerg unit in the early stages. And as the scout finds the Zork's Shroud... Okay, this looks kind of dire, but the Watchdog... The Gorgrikor is slow enough that the Watchdog can be built in time. And one Watchdog will zone out one Gorgrikor. Particularly since you can repair it. I'm not sure... I don't think he saw it. I actually don't think he saw the Gorgrikor. So this could be really bad immediately here. The Vulture is the first unit out. I think maybe he looked away at just the wrong moment. And again, this is what I said about it being volatile, right? This almost looks cheesy, but we can see, like, you have every opportunity to anticipate this. Your scout is there. You're thinking about what to do. At this stage, he does have a Cyclops out, but this is going to be really hard. You know, at this point, he's going to have to be in a situation where he pulls, you know, his workers maybe. He starts to use a Cyclops to try to attack and fall back. He doesn't have the money. He went into a Star Pet. He doesn't have the money to drop a Watchdog. So this is going to be the very fast GG. And at blistering speed, the Shambler is up 2-0. And that is going to seem almost impossible to play against if you're completely unfamiliar with things. But it was just the right time. We saw on the minimap his viewport going into that bottom left area. He's macroing up at home. He's not seeing the Gorgorcore spawn out there. And that is going to end up being the death of him because, you know, his Fulcrum was a little late. And then on top of it, there was no response to the fact that his Orchid Shroud was there. You know, maybe not doing the research of watching the Shambler's previous games where he did exactly that. So he's going to go ahead, and it looks like he was checking the replay out to see what was going on there. And we do indeed have a Ben Taberski in the chat. Yes, that was game 2. The first game, much closer, much more competitive, but only 10 minutes at the end of the day. So we might be over and done with relatively soon here. Just waiting on Neblime to select the next map. He's going to go ahead and consider his options. Let me go ahead and pull up our map pool here. Okay. Neblime thought he was out, but actually it's a best of 5. Homie, we are on Repulsion. This could be the last map, or Neblime could start his comeback of the century here. And what better way to close out Semifinals number 2 than to have something of a comeback and some more life in this series? The Shambler teaching him some very interesting things about Cosmonarchy Brood War and Zerg timings. Now, Equilibrium is a map that is, I would say, a lot more on the side of standard play. And the same is true about Repulsion. You know, you got your mains, you got your naturals, and then you got a big ol' empty middle, and then a whole lot of bases around the corners. So, you know, I always tend to like, you know, stuff to fight over in the middle. But there is a style. This is a style that is kind of like the Brood War style of like, you know, here's a middle. You know, maybe you could have more high ground or something in there for more variety, but here's a middle to fight over. There's not really a whole lot of bases there. Like, that is a style that works. So as we see the Palatinate Blue Terrans against the Eggshell Blue Zerg, we have Neblime going for a fast Stockade versus the Shambler, who, judging by the double gas here, is going to be going for a Zork's repeat. We'll see how soon the scout happens. But if you're going Stockade versus Gorgorcores, which I assume is going to be the option that Shambler goes for here. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe don't bother showing off any other strategies. But he didn't have enough minerals for what he wanted, and so he decides to go straight into Hydrock. Maybe that was his plan all along. Of course, it's 75 gas, so it's not insignificant. There will, of course, be a Mason scout from Neblime. I've noticed that the Shambler likes to scout sooner than the Neblime does. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that's kind of interesting to keep track of. Because when you're in a situation where you're always scouting ahead of your opponent, you do have that, you know, tempo advantage on information. This Maverick is placed in a spot to maybe get a stim and then whale down that worker. But obviously with the expanded HP pools, yeah, it'll take a second one. So this is pretty good. I mean, this is confirming for the Shambler that there was a fast Stockade. There is probably no other thing. You see 2 Mavericks there. You're pretty sure nothing else there. And Neblime has a worker down in the bottom right. This could be a proxy star pad. This could be something else. And I think it's this proxy star pad, boys. I'm looking at the resources. As soon as he gets that 125 minerals, I think he's dropping a proxy star pad. There it is. Okay. Has some cheeky ideas in mind. Skithricores are going to be the answer here. Neblime should be able to deal with this relatively well. He does have a couple of Mavericks. Now, the thing is, if his worker is going to hang out and, you know, stick around and maybe spot the Skith, it's not going to happen. Instead, he's just going to pull it home. Now, one Cyprian, okay, it'll, you know, finish relatively soon after this Skithricor arrives with the Mavs as well. You know, we're in a situation where I think, yeah, the Rescout's actually going to be pretty useful. It looks like maybe the Shambler, I'm not sure where that worker's rallied to somewhere. Maybe was just going to go ahead and take a natural. Instead, oh yeah, that was a mistake. Okay, gotcha. Easy. Nothing over here just yet as far as that is concerned. But of course, Skithricor DPS, single target-wise, not very good. I mean, they're not... That's the only thing they do, but they're not going to be super good at focusing down enemies, right? So this is mostly like a rescout than, you know, more than that than anything. And Anseal being built as the first unit out of the star pad is puzzling because it doesn't attack. But you know what? Well, oh no, he cancels it and goes for a second proxy star pad and then gets a Wraith. Now, the problem is, when you've got Skiths, you can scout around. You know, at this point, he's just started not scouting this spot. You know, Shambler's looking here, not because he thinks base is taken, but just because this is a good, you know, mounting spot for his offensive. There are more units. There's a Watchdog. This force on the bottom by the ramp can be picked off. There is the Cyprian, of course. It will be focused down. And yeah, he's going to want to fall back to the presence of that Watchdog, which has been completed. Oh, they're actually going to try to go after the Cyprian there. That's very bold. A couple idle workers as well. This one in the top left. We got another one in the bottom right building the star pad still for Neblime. And yeah, you know, at this point, you're retreating inward. You know, at this point, you're pulling the stockade and landing it. Now, I think the Shambler should be aware that Neblime should have more stuff than this. So, I'm not 100% sure what the Shambler thinks about that. Now, the Mason's been recalled. That could just end up looking like it's the Scout. And we do have more Wraiths on the way. There's no defenses back at home. So if all of the Skithricors are out on the other side of the map when those Wraiths hit, that could be very, you know, impactful, I think. And technically, you can fly over, you know, with obviously if your opponent is busy microing, you can fly over without actually attacking, and thus you don't have to ever worry about, you know, revealing yourself. He's going to go with 3. That is, you know, that's a fan favorite number, and the rest of them are not being rallied. Confirms the position of more. So the Skithricors are indeed on the other side, and there are no units being built at home here. So the Skithricors will have to pull back, because of course they could crush the Wraiths. And another thing that the workers could decide to do is just burrow, but that's obviously very, very bad for a variety of reasons. A lot of resources being floated as well, and the workers are indeed going to be, you know, pulled away. Yep, there's the burrow. And we are now at 12 workers, 11 workers. That's even less than by the way workers. As well as, you know, a bunch more being, you know, morphed. He does find the ones over here as well. So the Shambler, his economy is certainly in shambles. And this Wraith proxy ends up being very effective in that sense. But there's still so many Skithricors. You know, he's got to be somewhat cautious about doing this here for too much longer. There are so many Skithricors. And, you know, that's going to be pretty significant, right? That's 8 of them. He does have Zorka's tech. He can start mining again. He can start rebuilding. He's not that far behind in workers, and he's going to have a natural expansion soon to offset the economic loss. I'm certain that he'll have some, you know, anti-air defenses as a result, but that is indeed forcing more workers to not be what they currently are. So, yeah, potentially quite bad here for the Shambler, but at the same time, you know, these Wraiths, there's not really anything behind this is the problem. There's an Anseal down there. Avaleth's being made to guard the bases. So that's how he's going to go for it, and that makes sense too. This means that you don't have to commit, you know, units to defense or anything like that. You have detection. You can, you know, keep most of your workers on the mineral line. And at this point, yeah, his base is not being taken. But hey, that Avaleth could get picked off. Not really doing the moving shots here, but it should still be enough to snipe it and then fall back. That's very good. Each Avaleth is 75 minerals, 50 gas currently. So not a inexpensive unit, and certainly an unforced error to leave it out there all by its lonesome and to not react to that potential. So feeling condensed, feeling split. But if the Shambler is savvy, he knows, again, I did a lot of damage with just the contain, forcing neblime to go back. How much does he realistically have? You know, he's only now setting up his natural. So despite losing a couple of workers here and there and creeping on forward with the Spraiths, a second Ovaleth, and there's going to be Spraiths over here. This is a situation where you can see how you might take advantage of the Shambler's, you know, one-track mind in the early stages of the game, right? If he's not going to defeat you super early, his way of getting comfortable is going to be through, you know, going for something a little bit more, what would you say? It's going to be less about this, you know, early game stuff, and much more about, oh, I need to have my, you know, I need to have my forces, and I'm going to get my macro stuff going on and get into that multi-base play where I just have a million units and a great big economy. Oh, he's accidentally eaten one of his workers. I think he figured it out. Get that guy out of there. Well, the proxy play has concluded as the star pads float on home. At this point, we do have a considerable amount of wraiths, but they will need to hug the right side, fly over to the geysers, and then go for something like this. Looks like that's exactly what they're going to do. Just pick off the gas harvesters. Not a bad idea. He has the magic number to start one-shotting them. And the wraiths are now in the top right-hand corner. They can pick off like a worker and then fall away, but yeah, at this point, got to be careful. Losing one wraith already. Not the end of the world, obviously. But again, he doesn't have that much back at home. If Shambler can just get his Skittercores across the map, he can start putting out some serious punishment. Particularly, I would say, targeting, you know, the top base, or there's Cyprians in both of the anchors, so that's... Maybe I'm overselling how much damage he can actually do. But the big thing here is that his first combat unit in ages is coming up, and it's a Lekizalisk. He's had to build 6 colonies, 6 Cesians, and that's just to defend his mineral line from wraiths, which are not going to be the transition out. You know, the air units are probably not going to be what Neblime goes for. He's already got an Atlas up, so the man is already starting to do some very big tech things. Setting up a wall with the star pads, again, not necessarily super interested in using them. And at this point, I think we can say Neblime is decidedly ahead. There hasn't been a response. The window has closed. The defenses are up. There's absolutely no way for the Shambler to do much damage in this early stages of the game. He's starting to get some Gorger cores. His money is slowly, you know, padding up. Definitely needs more workers, particularly on minerals at this second base. Has a Lekizalisk up for anti-infantry. Skittercores are going to go across map and confirm that at least there's action down here in this in that base. Wraiths are coming back, but they're unlikely to do too much. I guess they can pick off that worker and be annoying. Maybe pick off this Kagran colony as well. There's a large number of them, right? Oh, even knocking the Ovaleth out of range to detect now. Now, the Gorgacores are here too, so they are very scary for anything stacked like that. Doesn't look like the Skittercores ever confirmed any sightings of anything. So, yeah, at this point, Shambler is getting pushed around quite a bit, I think. Skittercores and Gorgacores together. The Rokor brothers. A very merry band. But the Wraiths are now going to go ahead and spread out. Just cover their bases. I think that's Neblime calling this one, as far as the Wraith harassment is concerned. Does have a Trojan on the way, as well as some Palladium. So maybe some tank drops in the future. His one stockade has turned into an added vestry. More watchdogs being built in the back line. Again, the window for Shambler to harass is certainly over, at least in terms of these bases here. You know, he can maybe do some drops, but Ovaleths are fairly slow, and this map is not quite so small. Yeah, at this point, there have been 9 static defense structures purchased by the Zerg. That's 9 workers, on top of all the ones that died, that are not on the field, you know, making up the difference. No expansions out yet for either player beyond their naturals. But as I say that, a Mason is going to go ahead and build, presumably, a treasury down in the bottom middle. Obviously, some conversation about the treasury and its efficacy. Sentinel going down to guard it from ground. Of course, that's not the Shambler's prerogative right now, but his domain is certainly in the sky. Look at this, anti-drop play. Shambler kind of knows what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and grab some Lakizilisks and leave them over there. A Madrigal drop. Okay, so the Shambler is going to be treated to an old favorite here. There is nothing really guarding this base over here. There are some Lakizilisks on the way. That's actually pretty interesting. Now, it looks like neblime isn't quite confident in what he's doing, and I don't know what Shambler's up to here either. I actually don't know what this army movement is from either of the players. But if he goes for anti-drop and he leaves these Lakizilisks, then that's actually really good news. Good news for him is that he's got a couple of Lakizilisks over here in the main, which is seemingly where neblime wants to drop here. So I'm interested in how this is going to work out, because obviously the Madrigals will get chewed up. Oh, and look at that! The Madrigals have been found in the transports. Now, of course, there's no detection, so it only shows up at this point. And the Skittercores are not long for this world. One of the Madrigals does get picked off. Tactical lag, indeed. Canada moment. Well, some of the Wraiths end up suiciding thanks to neblime's manner thing. I already did that, so it makes no sense to do that now. But yeah, at this point, the jig is up. One Madrigal has been taken out. A lot of Skittercores were bruised. A lot of Gorgacores were bruised. Some Skittercores even died. And we have even more Madrigals coming out for the anti-air. So at this point, at this stage, you need a response that is even in tier, or you need to change your tune entirely. Maybe Vorvricors, maybe Iziricors. Certainly the Zorius is not a bad idea. I think Zorius plus Hydra here would be a great comp as well, and he does indeed have some Lakizilisks to back him up. So he can start making a push, but at this point I feel like maybe he needs to go for the macro game. Either he needs to win in this next push, or he needs to macro out and transition and just hold on, with the Terrans having the, having the map, basically. He is taking a third base, but he is behind in money. This base has already been up for a while, harvesting from the geyser. Starting to cap it. Seeing that over here, too. Looking around, there is a starport, but nothing else just yet here. In fact, that's probably the key thing, is that the production for neblime, in terms of like how many structures are actually actively building things at any given time. Look at this. There's an anticipation here as he deploys his Madrigals into the AoE mode. Hydra's out. Okay, this is looking much better. This is looking much better from the Shambler. He even confirms the position of the Terran army. Although for how long, I'm not sure. These two Madrigals actually being left behind. So they will accept some damage. Some Mavericks over there, discarding the base. Trying to pull back the wounded units there. But look at that. Look at all this. Look at all the Rocors that you just created with that. Interesting combo there. For people who don't know, the Madrigal in this mode has an unlimited target selection cap. So you can see with so many of them, that even the Zoriustalets do eventually fall. The Lakizilisks are going to go ahead and burrow. And crucially, they need to see the targets to see them. Oh, it doesn't look like they burrowed in time, though. That is a very expensive amount of units lost. So Shambler is going to be kicking himself over that. At the same time, looking to overwhelm this bottom position with air units wouldn't be a bad idea. Sentinels can only target ground, but Shambler's map knowledge is incomplete. He's not aware that there's bases like that. I'm not even sure if neblime is aware that the Sentinel can only target ground, but it says so. Yeah, that's a painful amount of Zerg. So we'll go ahead and let Shambler pause the game, or I guess I will. I will actually quickly confirm. Okay. We are back in the game, so never mind. Yes, it looks like checking visibility is indeed part of the function for the Madrigal. So they, if those Lakizilisks hadn't been within one shot of being killed, then they definitely would have stayed alive there. So this base is not going to be long for this world. And I think the mobility of the Madrigals plus their damage is certainly going to be quite difficult for the homies. You can see here, armor really heavily reduces the amount of DPS from each shot. But when you have so many of them, it almost doesn't necessarily matter. So there is going to be a push to move them up. And Shambler, obviously, when they're in a transport, they can't be very used. So they won't be elevated up after all. The Izira cores were going to go ahead and rotate over. But at this point, it's a very losing game. You're 2 bases against 4. I think the Shambler is on the ropes here. And neblime could very conceivably take this game and move out. Getting up to this tier 2.5, he's going to go ahead and go for commandments. Now, crucially, he doesn't have any missile silos, but this treasury is open, so he can go for that and just transfer workers instead of building them on site. There's going to be an attempt at dropping over here, but there are some nice Hydra placements, so we'll see if that ends up happening. Neblime's very tricky with his movement of air units. You'd think he's going one place when instead he pivots to the next. Tier 2 has been achieved by Shambler. This is very, very important, even though he's only on 2 bases, because he could start to get a more cost-efficient army. He's going to go for a Muthrock Spire. I'm guessing Protathalors outrange the Madrigals in their AoE control mode, and could also be Mutas for faster harassment of the base. So that's something. Maybe try to catch the Trojans. Of course, when you drop the Madrigals themselves, it's going to be pretty hard to fight them with Mutas. Yeah, mandrigals, as the chat says. Yeah, pretty true. Pretty true. They're definitely a graphic I need to work a little bit better on. Look at this. We've got another mech drop as well over here, heading to the second base. Now, this is where all the army is. So, it's quite likely that this drop gets repelled. But if they go together, which is instead going to happen, yeah, there's going to be some Izira cores just sent out along the map. Shambler's actually sending out all of his units. So this is potentially quite, I would say, disastrous for one player or another. That's 2 Madrigals going, or 8. No, never mind. That was just a standard mech, it looks like. I'm not sure. Yep, good irradiate there from the Seraphs. Izira cores are going to take a while to actually go down that way. And I think because of this engagement being split, there's actually a fairly good amount of damage dealt by that, right? Like all of the units, or not all of the units actually went down, so that was a contributing factor. But, you know, considering he's at a tech disadvantage with that army, that's pretty good. There are indeed Protathalors out. Protathalors are a swarmy, sort of individually not so significant artillery unit, you can kind of think of them as. Anything with Thalor on the bottom right. Oh, I say on the bottom right because I'm looking at the bottom right, but on the as the suffix of their name, you know, Thalor is a artillery unit, basically. Now, these 2 Sentinels are going to go ahead and be taken out. I'm not sure that the other ones will be. It doesn't look like it. You know, maybe one of them will be poked down here unless it's repaired in time. Meanwhile, some Masons rallying over here for some reason. So, just to see what's going on, I guess. He's just going to start building Sentinels over here. So that's pretty funny. And this is the Shambler trying to set up his third. His mined out at his his main. These are, well, not mined out yet, but he's close to being depleted, right? And then, you know, we're looking at this. There's not crazy amounts of resources left here either. So yeah, the question is, you know, where does he want to go next? He's got the Protathalors out. He can start to maybe poke down these. Now, the problem is Protathalors have even range on the Sentinels, and they don't have great armor pen. So they only have 2 armor pen, which means they will not pierce the Sentinel entirely. But if the Zoriustalets can, you know, take those hits initially, and there you can see the efficacy of the Protathalors against the Madrigals specifically, maybe this 4th base can go down. You know, it really depends on how soon they jump on, what the target selection is like. The Zoriuses are going to try to occupy that. And yeah, look at that. The first ones go down. Here's the big mech drop. Yeah, Shambler's probably like, well, fuck that, I'm out. So that's a pretty big nope. But, you know, at tier 2, you have a little bit more freedom as Zerg. A couple more options. Got a patrol out for anti-drop. And clearly, drops are going to be the name of the game for Neblime at this point. Not really moving out with big armies of units themselves. You know, obviously easier to do that. He's got double silo, double anvil, as they're called now. And he's got 4 mantles in the back, constantly producing Ramses to keep his minerals low. Ramses, a crowd control-oriented walker unit, similar to the Cyclops, but doesn't deal the delayed damage and instead deals, you know, just standard fare Terran damage as far as that's concerned. The Seraphs are on patrol. Lakizilisks, Protathalors, Zoryusthaleths. A big Droleth worker change. And no gas harvesting on here. Shambler not interested in that just yet. I'm going to go ahead and borrow some Lakizilisks. That coverage isn't superb for a drop down here, but it's good for anything, you know, running in to the side. I think neblime is going to be able to close this game still. The only tier 2 that we actually see out of the Shambler at this stage is this over here. Some more tactical lag, but a big drop coming out, as well as the Seraph's able to start nuking. And so this force, while it's being occupied, that's the majority of the Shambler's units. Meanwhile, that is not even close to the majority of the units available to neblime. And this drop here, you know, okay, yeah, you can't see the Lakizilisks, but this is still pretty significant, I think. Big army coming in. Seraph still here to detect and to see. You're getting choked up on the ramp, trying to come back around. The cliff advantage giving them even extra range. And the observance rending the armor even further, making those madrigals that much more useful in this mode versus something like a Zoryusthaleth. Irradiates for good measure. A nuke to seal the deal. And the GG is called. The Shambler bleeds, and neblime will find his first victory as the nuke goes off. So we have a series, ladies and gentlemen. This is not over yet. Shambler will select the next map. I think you can see there, if you're able to repel or throw a wrench into the plans of the early game action from the Shambler, you're actually able to see, you know, longer game go on, maybe some of his weaknesses be exposed. Neblime had a lot of advantages stacked up and didn't quite close on them for a while. Let the Shambler get to tier 2. But the fact that there was no economic push, the fact that he lost so many workers in the early stages of the game, that's a pretty big loss. And now the Shambler selects Megalith Empire as his next battleground of choice. If neblime takes Megalith Empire, our decider is Maim Street. Personally, I'm rooting for that. All right, let's get right into this. Map 4 of our semifinals here. The Shambler versus neblime. The Shambler, the American hope. The Texan hope, specifically. I think Mystery Meat's American. He thinks it's destiny for him to jump straight into the grand finals. Has he overlooked neblime? Megalith Empire is a map that can end very quickly, or can turn into a very defensive slog. There's not usually too many middle grounds there. We've seen this map a few times. The feet cheese, the anchor coming out of Mystery Meat to close out Biddy B's Protoss. Well, not quite close them out, but that was map 2 in their series. Obviously, neblime has to be wary of early air rushes. But the Shambler only now started to harvest, you know, extra gas with that second worker. I think it's a Zorkiz first. I think it's a fast Gorgorcore. What can you do with a stockade opener against something like that? It's going to be the question here as the Zorkiz Shroud does get put down, but it's going to be spotted very early, and neblime at this point should have a feeling for what the Shambler is all about when he sees that structure. And yes, the colors are asparagus for the Shambler and platinum purple for neblime. Platinum purple, second time it's shown up here. And look at that. Some Mason tickling happening. We do have the neutral anchor in the middle of the map. You cannot lift it off, but you can garrison it. Might come into play, but unlikely when air units are planned. 2 Mavericks will be the first unit of choice here. Zorkiz Shroud still taking its sweet time. Honestly, with this rush distance, you could just move these Mavericks across the map and start to threaten. Maybe get a couple of worker kills. So, I'm almost a little surprised neblime didn't do that, but remember, neblime is on elimination point as he drops his Watchdog in a very, very adequate spot. But it's not Gorgorcores. This is a Lekizalisk drop opener. The Ovaleth is on the way. It will be dropping here or perhaps here. Over here. It does technically target this spot. Excuse me. But it's not super good. And again, what can you do? What can you do versus this? When you're not, you're not able to keep scouting in the main. You don't see the Lekizalisk hatch. You don't see the Ovaleth hatch. A huge investment, guys. 50 gas and 75 minerals for the Ovaleth. 175 for the Lekizalisk. And the Zork's Shroud opener to begin with. Very vulnerable in the early game, but it might not matter. He needs to use the Masons to reveal the Lekizalisk's position by getting close enough to them. And he's not even looking. He only sees it as it burrows. He pulls the workers. Oh, but they're so clumped up. What can he do about this? How can he respond to this? He needs detection. The Watchdog will lift. There's not really a whole lot that he can mine from. In fact, this Lekizalisk has full coverage and totality over this worker line. And what does he have? He doesn't have anything. Now, admittedly, there's no units back at home. He could have maybe taken his infantry and done a base trade. He could have maybe decided to uproot, lift off somewhere else even. A star pad on the way. Has enough, not gas, but enough minerals to go for an Anseal afterwards. But is he really going to concede his whole mining operation this entire time? A saving grace. The Circuith is what was being built back at home. Another Lekizalisk is here. If he can guard his ramp against it, he might be okay. But it's unlikely. And instead, the GG is called. And the Shambler has Lekizalisk dropped his way to the grand finals. Unbelievable. Wow. What a spot there. And Megalith Empire, you could tell the Shambler picked that for a reason. The Shambler wanted to do that very explicitly because he knew that the rush distance was small. He knew that the air distance was small. And at that point, what can you really do? The grand final Lekizalisk. Absolute destruction. And you know what? Despite two of those games being very fast and clear evidence of Neblime's inexperience with the meta, I think that the third game, when he was able to take it on Repulsion, was very good. It showed his capacity for, doing the drops, and he started to use some of those things like, for example, the... what would you say? He started to use the Madrigals for one. He started to use just mech drops in general. He took a lot of bases and teched up and all this other stuff. He started to use Seraphs with the nukes. Like, this stuff all works out, man. Like, he's clearly got the ability to adapt, and he's got the raw mechanics that he's trained by playing so much Starcraft to adapt into this project and be a successful player. Obviously, his time might be a little strapped. We're all strapped for time in one way or another. And as the Shambler is saying in the events channel right now, Neblime did pretty well for a very new beginner. And I would say game one also was, back and forth, but unfamiliar with how Zerg play in general. Certainly unfamiliar with how the Shambler plays. And then, games 2 and 4, just not aware of what might be happening. And he had his Mason in relatively close proximity, but he expected the Gorgorcore opener out of the fourth game, and the Shambler knew that. And because his Mason just left that and assumed it was for granted, took it for granted, it's just his unfamiliarity with how Zerg play, I think. So I expect Neblime to be able to push further in, maybe make some grand finals in the future of Ascension tournaments. We are going to have another one this Saturday, so he will have an opportunity if he wants to pitch in and play some more matches. Of course, we'll see about doing that. But that was the semifinals number 2 of Ascension number 1. We got some things to think about for sure. And going into our final, it's the final we were hoping for if you've been following the project and following the cast overs and just being a part of the community. Mystery Meat and the Shambler, they are the strongest and most veteran players that we have in this tournament. So seeing them both in the playoffs and then seeing them both in the grand finals, that is exactly what we would hope for. Just for the highest quality match where we can really see, I think, a back and forth series. Mystery Meat has looked imperious thus far, but a couple of matches in group stage and that third match against Biddy looks like maybe he could have been mortal. Meanwhile, the Shambler actually did get, bloodied by Neblime in that third match. So it wasn't all sunshine and flowers for him either. I think these players can certainly exploit some weaknesses of each other. They're both very familiar with how their respective races work. And Mystery Meat has even randomed a lot. I think Shambler was recently playing some Terran anyway, so he's kind of aware of what you want to do as a Terran, and of course Mystery Meat aware of what you want to do as a Zerg. I think that's really interesting, and we're going to see how that plays out whenever we get that grand final scheduled. Keep an eye out for streams that are scheduled on the YouTube channel. Keep an eye out on the Discord server for the events, which I always try to keep up to date. And we'll see you guys for the grand finals, Mystery Meat versus the Shambler. It's coming up later on this week.